what can you tell us about this newest defamation and the $965 that the Alex Jones is ordered to pay here?
Well, this is really a verdict that is historic. This has really started out in, unfortunately, some of the most tragic circumstances imaginable. As far as the posture of the case is concerned, it was 3 separate cases that the judge decided to consolidate into one. So you had 15 plaintiffs in this case in total, with some really incredible allegations. And remember, this is not just a case of defamation involving Alex Jones coming in and generally saying that this horrific mass shooting didn't happen, or that people were generally actors that were just trying to play certain parts, which in and of itself is terrible enough. But he also called out people specifically. He named names. He brought the people who would ultimately be the plaintiffs in this case out into the public forefront, and they were subjected to some horrible online harassment. They were terribly mistreated, and it was just, it's been almost a decade of torture that they've gone through on top of the horrific loss as a result of the murder. So this is a very unique case. It's really a historic verdict from a damages standpoint. There is no cap for compensatory damages under Connecticut law. So it really is just a massive result, $965 million for these 15 plaintiffs.
Like you said, some of those moving money around a little bit, but he also said he's going to enforce it. How would that transpire? How would they make sure to enforce it? Because he's only supposedly net worth in the $100 to $200 million range. So how do they enforce that directly?
Well, that's a great question, and that gets into a body of law known as creditors' rights. And to make a long story short, there are a lot of tools in the creditors' rights toolbox to bludgeon a judgment debtor over the head and to try to determine and uncover where are your assets, where are your bank accounts, where you have a judgment against the individual, you have a judgment against the business enterprise. You can enforce and collect assets from the business. You can garnish bank accounts. I had a judgment here in the District of Columbia one time where I had the United States Marshal Service go into someone's office and just clean out his office of all belongings, and including fine art on the walls. There's a lot of different ways that you can enforce a judgment. He probably doesn't have $1 billion, but he has perhaps several $100 million. That was a finding that came forth in the Texas case. So I don't believe that he's going to be able to avoid this for the most part, and to the extent that he's trying to reduce his net value per fraudulent transfers, that's going to fall flat, and he's just going to fail miserably on that attempt.
Definitely. Thank you again, attorney there, Seth Berenzweig. They're talking about this Alex defamation trial that is just wrapping up. But you also mentioned appeal. How long is this going to take? Because we've also seen this go on for the better part of a decade since this 2012 massacre. What does the appeal process look like, and can this be extended even further? As you heard the family saying, it's been a long time, a long journey. How much longer must they endure?
So an appeal typically takes between 1 and 2 years. However, unless the court issues some kind of an injunction, some kind of a stay against execution of the judgment, or requires the party to post some kind of a bond that's adequate to cover the winning parties, they're going to enforce the judgment regardless of an appeal. So the appeal will take a while, but that doesn't necessarily stand in the way of enforcement and collection. The other thing I'd like to add that's also very important, that's directly along the lines of your question, is that I think it's important to take a step back historically and see what is the significance and importance of this verdict, even much higher than the dramatic Texas jury verdict. This is a kick in the gut to fake news on social media. This is a demonstration to people who are going online every hour of every day peddling fake news to people to try to get them to give them more money, to demonstrate that they can't hide behind the First Amendment, because defamation is a recognized exception to that. They can't hide behind a bunch of attorneys, because that's not going to work either. So people are going to be held accountable. There's a new age of defamation that is now going to be recognized. It's a kick in the gut to fake news. And this is not by any means the defeat of fake news, but it's an important historic initial chapter that really needs to be recognized.
Definitely, and you mentioned it because with some of the parents outside of that courtroom were talking about some restored faith in just the internet and what they can see with is not just the First Amendment. You can say anything. You can be held liable for saying that that massacre was a hoax. We also saw that Alex Jones in Texas, you mentioned the $50 million in damages there, but now with this nearly $1 billion. This isn't the last we're seeing of Alex Jones in court, though, is it?
No, there's a third trial coming up, and that's coming up around the corner. And none of these trials are being halted as a result of any kind of bankruptcy, automatic stay, or anything of the like. So these trials will continue. The damages will continue. I predict that there'll be another verdict that will be coming down against him over the coming months. So I don't think it's going to be very long also for InfoWars to just be shut down. I mean, there's just so long that this terrible organization is going to be taken down because you need resources in order to operate any business. And at the end of the day, once you have an execution of a judgment for these hundreds of millions of dollars, that's going to really just unplug the cable on that show. So it's very interesting to note that during the verdict, he was sitting in his studio mocking the verdict live as it was happening. He wasn't even in the courtroom. So that just shows how intellectually incapable he is of even showing one inkling of being a human being through this entire process. And no doubt that will be a moment that he'll also have to be held accountable for as the next trial occurs.
Definitely. And thank you so much, Seth Berenzweig, there as we continue to talk about this trial there with Alex Jones. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. It gave some good context to what we were watching earlier here.